It's my great pleasure to introduce Iain. He, when I first met him back in 2010, I believe it was, he really helped me change the way I did outreach. It used to be kind of random, bouncing around from here and there and helping people out. There was a lot of need out there in the streets. In his approach to ending homelessness, and particularly street outreach, and basically assessing people and determining the people that needed our help the most, because there's too many people out there that we can help out at once. And literally, the tool he created to help us determine people that what help they need and who needed it first, really what it did was help us rank people most likely to die next on the streets. And as someone who works with people living out there on the streets and seeing the suffering and knowing the people that die out there, it made a whole lot of sense to me to change his approach. So I jumped in immediately and started learning from him, and all the his teachings and guidance over the years has greatly helped shape me and therefore my team, and also our whole response to homelessness in Northwest Michigan. Thank you so much, Iain. Take it away.
Thank you, Ryan. Those are great words. I really appreciate them. And good afternoon to everybody. It is an absolute delight to be invited to an event like this of Gathering for Good. It is an absolute delight to speak in a community or for a community and an organization within a community that I know and I admire. And as Ryan alluded in his opening remarks, I've had a relationship with this organization now for a decade. I've seen growth and change, but what I've seen during that time is unrelenting commitment to try to focus on ending homelessness. And for that, I am absolutely grateful. I also want to thank the organizers for inviting me and give my special congratulations to the award recipients, Tina, for the work that is so remarkably well done, and for everybody involved with food rescue and promoting food security in your corner of Michigan. So it's true that I am in Canada. Before COVID-19, I would spend every Sunday through Friday night or Saturday morning somewhere in the world. And it has impacted my life such that now I have the ability to work from home, including providing this keynote from home to all of you today. There are three themes that I want to hit on in the keynote today. And just to reiterate what was said in the opening introductions or instructions, if you have any questions as I go through, by all means, put them in the question and answer box, and I'll answer as many as we have time for in the end. But the three things that I wanted to talk about today at a relatively high level is, what exactly is homelessness? And I know that's going to sound like a very obvious question, but the answer isn't as obvious as people think it is. Second thing I want to talk about are the solutions to homelessness. So what do we know actually works? Which leads to the third part. If we know what homelessness is, and we know what the solutions are, what gets in the way? All right, understanding homelessness. For those of you who work in the field of homelessness, this might sound familiar to you. For those of you who don't work directly in the field of homelessness, I want you to let you in on a little secret, which is people who work the front line of homeless services day in, day out can get burnt out. There's a lot of human suffering, a lot of emotional empathy that has to be expended. There's parts of the human condition that you never wish you saw, and then there's going to be other days of absolute elation and joy. But this roller coaster ride of emotions led me to a place at one point in my career where I knew that my effectiveness had dwindled quite significantly. And it had dwindled quite significantly, not because I lost my passion, but because I lost my focus. And my focus really started to stop seeing people as human beings and start seeing people as widgets or gidgets or just another face to get behind a door in housing. It doesn't mean that I wasn't committed to ending homelessness. That has been with me in my career for approximately 2 decades. It just meant that in my pursuit of ending homelessness, I stopped seeing the humanity. And that humanity really struck me during one of these times of burnout, where I came to realize that I was making the same mistakes that Uncle Larry was making. Well, you might say, who's Uncle Larry? Well, I'll let you in on that one too. I don't actually have an Uncle Larry, but I think we all know Uncle Larry. Uncle Larry is the guy who says things like, just got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Uncle Larry says things like, they made their bed, now they have to lie in it. Uncle Larry says things like, why do I go to work all day for people just to loathe around all day and live off the system and live off the government? Uncle Larry says things like, those people, because I love the way he says those people. Uncle Larry says, those people just drink and have sex all day. Uncle Larry, my burnout, led me to a place of appreciating that 3 types of people experience homelessness. And only 3 types of people experience homelessness: someone's parent, someone's sibling, and someone's child. If we remember that homelessness has a face, if we remember that the people we serve are not invisible, then we move away our discussion about whether or not this is a manifestation of character flaws or moral failings, and into a place where we take a deeper dive into the humanity of homelessness, to appreciate that every single person has their story, and our systems of care and support are not designed to allow people to live the best version of their story. We don't talk nearly enough about the impacts of racial inequality on homelessness. We don't talk nearly enough around how social isolation leads to homelessness. We don't talk nearly enough around how trauma leads to homelessness. We don't talk nearly enough of the pipeline that we create out of the child welfare system and the emancipation of children who are in foster care, or inappropriate discharging from correctional facilities or hospital facilities. We don't talk nearly enough that every single person or family that experiences homelessness is subject to a pipeline of missteps that led to them being in that position. You see, homelessness itself is a remarkably rare event. It hardly happens to anybody. So even though Uncle Larry says that everybody's the same, and even though we sometimes homogenize homelessness to say things like the homeless, every single person has their own vulnerabilities. Every single person has their own strengths. Isn't it odd then that we stand so in judgment of people who need our services? Isn't it odd that we who are housed try to determine who's deserving and undeserving in the pursuit of achieving a home? If you were to ask me who found their way into housing from homelessness 10 years ago, I would tell you it's the person who can advocate really well for themselves. I'd tell you it's the person who's really lucky. I'd tell you it's the person who today was their day. They went to the right organization that had a resource and a human being who was available to assist them. But what we don't talk nearly enough about is all of those people in our society who have the exact same conditions as people experiencing homelessness, but never experience homelessness. Let me give you some examples. If we were to look at data relative to economic poverty, we realize that there are a lot of poor people where you live. Almost none of them become homeless. If we were to look at data from SAMHSA for the state of Michigan, we learned that about 7% of the state of Michigan's population has an addiction or dependency on alcohol, and that over 90% of those people receive no treatment or counseling for their alcoholism. We learned that just under 5% have an addiction or dependency on other types of drugs like opioids. Just under 90% receive no treatment or counseling. We learn that about 4% of the Michigan population has a serious mental illness, and that close to 50% receive no treatment or counseling for their mental illness. And almost every single one of those people who are economically poor, living with a substance use disorder, and mentally ill are more likely to be housed than they are to be homeless. Homelessness is a remarkably rare event. But when it does happen, we also don't understand it. Well, by and large. See, if you look at data, if you kind of nerd out in the space of homelessness, which I'm inclined to do, you'd come to appreciate really quickly that most people that experience homelessness, it happens once in their life for a very short period of time and it never happens again. So, what about those that stay longer? What about those who are stuck in the condition of homelessness? Well, that leads me, of course, to this afternoon's quantum physics lesson, where I would like to discuss how black holes work, or at least my interpretation of how black holes work after reading Theoretical Body of Knowledge by Stephen Hawking. Essentially, it goes like this. If you're really big and you're moving fast, you won't get sucked into a black hole. This is good news for any of us, like me, who don't want to diet. This isn't about being overweight. This is a black hole prevention strategy right here. Kidding aside, mass and velocity keeping you out of a black hole. Well, most people don't experience homelessness because they have resources and they don't want to be there. If you go deeper into a black hole, it's because you're missing mass or velocity. If I give you that resource or I give you that momentum, you might be on your way. And we see that within homeless serving organizations throughout the world. The help with the form, the referral, the helping with mediation when there was a conflict with their brother that they could go live with, or the ability to get people connected to just that one health resource or community resource that makes all the difference in the world. But then there's an event horizon in a black hole. And that event horizon is really the place by which it's going to take a Herculean effort to make your way out of the black hole. If you're devoid of mass and velocity, you seek out other objects devoid of mass and velocity. So goes the theory. And so I would ask you, of everybody who's chronically homeless in your community, who do they hang out with? I'll bet the answer is other people who are chronically homeless. Our families with really deep and profound needs hang out with other families with deep and profound needs. Our youth that are unaccompanied and homeless hang out with other youth who are unaccompanied and homeless. And that group that goes beyond the event horizon, have had this internal switch flipped. No longer are they a person who's working their butt off every single day to get out of their homelessness. They're not the person anymore who's trying to get the job. They're not the person anymore who's calling landlords. They're not the person anymore who's trying to reconcile with their mother or to get financial resources from their uncle. This is not the person who is trying to apply for government benefits that they're eligible for. This is the person who says, I am homeless, without a plan of becoming unhomeless. And isn't that the space and the place for us to enter into to be most effective? Do we as a society want to accept that some people will resign themselves to homelessness for the rest of their lives? We have to inject a sense of urgency into our approach of ending homelessness. We have to appreciate that for every single person's parent or sibling or child, that one more night of being homeless places them at phenomenal risk in their health, safety, and future prospects. Now, I've been at this for a period of time, as said in the brief introduction, around the world. And I've come to appreciate that there's lots of things that we can agree to disagree on, but how to end homelessness is not one of those things. Because the solution to homelessness is really simple. Housing. Well, I didn't say it was easy. I said it was simple. Just like if you wanted to bake a cake, I could give you a recipe. That'll simplify things for you. Does that mean that following the recipe is going to be easy? Not necessarily. We've got to stop agreeing to disagree when it comes to complex social issues. And I'm going to say something else that sometimes turns people the wrong way, so I want to make sure I say it the right way so that you'll hear me this time. Ending homelessness is professional work. Is there a place for volunteers? Yes. Faith-based organizations? Sure. Students? Absolutely. Business? Yes. But it is professional work. If we needed to build a bridge in your community, I'll bet we can contact an engineer, hopefully one that has experience in bridge building. They study the issue, they design a bridge, and they tell you what type of bridge you need for the load it needs to carry and the distance it needs to travel. Where might we get public input on a bridge? We might ask the public, what should we name the bridge? We might ask the public, what color should the bridge be? We might have non-architectural features that are essentially adornments on the bridge that we might ask for people's input on. But we would never open it up to the general public to say, how do you design a bridge? Because it comes with expertise. Why is it with complex social issues, we open it up and we treat all opinions as if they're facts? If we want to understand homelessness, we have to understand that it's a professional intervention that helps people access housing that gets them out of their homelessness. And if we accept that professionalism, we know that in order to be effective with people experiencing homelessness, we need to lean into the diversity that exists rather than retracting to a place of homogenization. What I really mean by that is we have to understand each person's story. They're not widgets and gadgets. We're not in an ending homelessness factory. And so if we're really going to celebrate and really lean into our ability to be effective in helping people access and maintain housing, what we need to do is redesign programs to meet the needs of people and stop trying to redesign people to meet the needs of programs. We can redesign the programs. We are lousy at redesigning people. Can you imagine if there were other parts of life that essentially said, change who you are so I can give you what you need, rather than you are who you are and I will give you what you need? Let me give you an example. Stay with me. Imagine you've had a heart attack. Now, I don't wish this upon any of you, but let's imagine that has happened. You get rushed to the hospital. Would there ever be a situation where, upon being rushed to the hospital, having had a heart attack, that would make you step on a scale? Where we'd say, I'm sorry, Ian, we can't help you with your heart attack. You're overweight. And the Surgeon General has been clear on this, that obesity is bad for heart health. So lose weight, then come back, and we'll help you with your heart attack. We wouldn't do that. If the same person was a smoker, would we help them with their heart attack? I'd like to think that we would. I'd like to think that we wouldn't say to the person, hey, look, smoking's bad for your heart. Be smoke-free for 14 days, then come back, then we'll help you with your heart attack. Let's say, because of the pain in your chest, you're speaking loudly and cussing because of the pain in your chest and the heart attack. Would we kick you out of the hospital because you swore in the hospital and not help you with your heart attack? Probably not. Well, I know. What if you once killed a guy? Would we help you with your heart attack, or would we say, I'm sorry, sir, an eye for an eye? What if it's your fourth heart attack? Would we still help you? Or would we say, look, buddy, you've had 3 chances. Clearly, you don't deserve a fourth. If you were serious about your heart, you would have taken care of matters already. You could be an overweight smoking jerk who once killed a man, having your fourth heart attack, and we would still help you with your heart attack. Yet in homeless services, or more accurately, the people that we support in homeless services, time and again, historically, we've tried to redesign people to meet the needs of our programs. We've said things like, you need to be sober to be successful in housing. You need to take your medication to be successful in housing. You need a job to be successful in housing. You have to stop hanging out with that group of people of being successful in housing. You have to go to this church and repent if you want to be successful in housing. And the list goes on and on. What we need to do if we truly want to solve homelessness is truly, and I mean truly and unequivocally, engage in relationship without judgment. It is not my job to stand in judgment of people to determine if they are deserving and undeserving based upon the qualities of their character. So what gets in the way? I'd say the number one thing that gets in the way, in my opinion, is our applied morality. I've been researching this the past number of years, really leaning into the literature on moral psychology, really have become enamored with Jonathan Haidt and his constructs of 5 moral foundations of all people, whether you'd say that they're morally or socially liberal or conservative. We share the same 5 moral foundations. We don't believe in hurting one another. We generally believe in a just or fair society. We believe in in-group loyalty. We believe in respect, and we believe in purity and sanctity of the body. The problem is we don't believe the same things about those, and in particular, the purity and sanctity of the body. So our moral dilemmas really come down to informing our service approach. Is it moral to house someone who's addicted to alcohol or other drugs? Is it moral to house someone who participates in sex work? Is it moral to assist someone whose children have been taken into care? Is it moral to assist someone who isn't from your community using resources from your community? If we can deal with our own hangups, our own limitations, if we can truly say that everybody is ready for housing so long as they are homeless and breathing, then we can use those professional services, but we can also redesign our system of care. And this is the genius behind the scenes of dedicated people, as we saw talking about collaboration and the journey towards making change happen in coalitions, is that people realize if we want to invest in change, we're going to have to spend on impact. That isn't just spending money, that's spending time, that's spending our social capital, that's spending our intellect to solve particular problems that nobody else has solved before. And if it's not our morality, then people will say the real thing that gets in the way is the fact that there's no housing. There are limitations on housing just about everywhere I go. The Traverse City area is no exception. And yes, some of your needs are acute given the nature of your economy and the tourists that turn it into a summer playground. So I'm not trying to take away those things. I'm just saying, if you say there's no housing and you stop looking for housing, you'll never find housing. Let me also say that one of the greatest silver linings we will see coming out of the pandemic will be investments that will allow us to help people get into housing. When the Bezos Foundation came knocking, why did they love your organization? Because you presented an opportunity to engage in complex problem solving, like still housing people in your housing market. I think back to Dan's initial remarks, and I didn't write down the number fast enough, but just even this fact that people are still being housed in the midst of a pandemic tells us that it is still it's still possible to house people, and that it's entirely possible that housing markets will be turned on their head and we will have even more opportunities to house people. But if we give up on housing people, we're giving up on the solution. You know, one of the parallels I saw in the response to COVID-19 was governors talking about the lack of ventilators and the tough decisions that hospitals would have to be making of who's going to get access to a ventilator and who's going to die. And I thought of our homelessness and housing system. And I thought about the scarcity of housing and how that's kind of like the scarcity of ventilators. Do we as a community want to throw our hands up and say, well, I guess some people are just going to die. We don't have enough housing. Or are we going to try to solve the problem by creating more housing stock? By advocating for different zoning and planning regulations where they make sense? By decreasing bureaucracy? By even looking at novel ways of housing people, like shared housing? Because the last thing that gets in the way is the truancy in our determination. If you give yourself a hall pass and say it's not my responsibility or my job to go about ending homelessness, then what you're really saying is that someone's parent, sibling, or child doesn't matter. Would it matter if it was your parent, sibling, or child? I'll bet it would. Thanks, everybody.
Wow,